Issue 46. We start out with a flashback to when Uncle Chuck, who I mistook for Sonic until I finally noticed the brown hair, had first invented a prototype to the roboticizer in an effort to prolong the lives of people with cybernetics. Oh god, I hate the font used for this textbook. I can barely read it because it's so italicized and stuff. Anyways, in a panel where he looks absolutely terrible, just reminds me of why I like his robot design instead, Uncle Chuck says in horror that he's accidentally turned his brother into a mindless machine. How do you accidentally program a machine to do that? You'd think he'd know what his own machine was capable of. So, is this how Sonic's father got roboticized? This is interesting. I guess that explains why he was seen being raised by his uncle when his uncle was working as a chili dog merchant then. Then we see Uncle Chuck projecting an image onto curtains, and his eyes look weird because he had installed the latest digital video technology to his eyes to be a better spy. This allows him to not only record what he sees, but also play back any pre-recorded video. Oh, and also Dulcie's here. And she acts like the Cloud Cookie Lander by asking if he has a bunch of movie stations too. Chuck explains that a video retrieved by a spy network is a byproduct of a secret surveillance system in the former Royal Palace that provides proof that Robotnik had actually sabotaged the original roboticizer. So that makes a lot more sense. I was half expecting that. Also, it looks like his first name is Julian and not Ivo in this continuity. At least it's an actual name and one that's easy to know how to pronounce. Chuck gets comforted over how he feels bad about himself for not being able to rescue more Robians. And then we cut to them sitting in the woods at a night campfire for a military retreat, which I don't think I ever find out what they're actually planning to do here. With Chuck saying that Eggman knew that his guilt from what he thought he did would force him to resign as the kingdom's scientific advisor to be a chili dog maker. This provides an actual explanation for why an inventor is squandering his talents working as a chili dog maker, as well as why the king didn't just have Chuck as his scientific advisor, because Chuck quit. Chuck, still feeling sorry for himself, making himself more sympathetic, complains that he didn't even know about the existence of the Death Egg until it was almost too late. It does make sense that not every robot of Eggman's would be told about every new plan. He wasn't exactly on the highest rung, but he was still around Eggman a lot, wasn't he? You'd think he would have overheard something. A bunch of eyes pop out of the bushes, which worries the freedom fighters, but then they're revealed to be a bunch of other freedom fighters known as the Wolf Pack. Intimidating biker gang name, grumpy muscular dudes. Somehow I don't find these people trustworthy. At the very least they have standout designs that makes me interested in them, especially Lupe. One of them explains that Robotnik's building a new line of superbots. And yep, just as I expected, these assholes really aren't trustworthy because we see for the first time discrimination against Robians, as one of them accuses Uncle Chuck of being Robotnik's spy. Fortunately, Jeffrey comes in and tells everyone to quiet down before they'll track the entire planet. Never mind. I thought he was coming in to be the voice of reason and defending Chuck, but instead he reveals that he was spying on him, because he's suspicious too. I guess it is possible, I can't see where they're coming from here. I guess it is possible that Eggman could have somehow discovered Chuck had regained free will and robbed him of it and made him his spy that way. So maybe Jeffrey and them are just being careful. But I really wasn't expecting him to be racist against Robians. He also points out that the agent who had uncovered Chuck's video earlier was in fact the traitor dog Sleuth, even if it was weeks before he made his inexplicable betrayal. Jeffrey snorks that one spy is covering for another, and Dulcie has a pretty good line where she remarks, "We didn't know you sniffed, we just thought you smelled." Well, it's good in the sense that he really deserves it at this point. And then Jeffrey says that he thinks the entire spy network and supposedly phony video, how is it phony anyway, are just a ruse to cover up Chuck working for the other side. Even though it should be blatantly obvious that with Chuck spending so much time at Knothole, you'd think if he was being used as a spy all along, Eggman would have found Knothole by now. This is hard to watch. I didn't expect this of him. Although Jeffrey, to be fair, was shown to be very paranoid when we first saw him, being paranoid of Sally at first before knowing who she was, and then tackling Hamlin on sight. Maybe him being paranoid due to once working for the Royal Guard, which is all about paranoia, isn't too out of character. This is his major flaw, so it's about time that it came back after being dropped for a while. I really like Sonic's response to this. Are you naturally this stupid, or do you practice? But I think pointing out that Knothole's location hadn't been sent to Eggman yet would have been a better retort. Then after Sonic punches him, Jeffrey ties him up and threatens to kill him, because he's too stupid to realize how much doing that would benefit Eggman. I wonder if his constantly calling him an amateur and stuff is caused by a fragile ego where he doesn't want to think Sonic's better than him for being fast and stuff. Awesome, Antoine's actually useful for once, as despite being the least courageous, it's somehow him who decides to attack Jeffrey while saying that although he doesn't think Sonic's smart, he still doesn't think he deserves death. So it's keeping him in character by reaffirming the rivalry while also establishing that he's a good guy. Something that really needed to be reaffirmed after he had plotted to get Sonic banished in issue 40 and did nothing good since. Antoine reveals that he's always been suspicious of Jeffrey. Oh god, another person who's paranoid of him, and insists that he is the spy. I agree with Sally on this one, that would be pretty nonsensical. Remember, Jeffrey is a Mobian. Anyone who's not brainwashed would hate Eggman. Turn people into robots, destroying the world. So he'd have no reason to want to work for him, let alone trust him. Antoine explains that years ago, a top general and close friend of the king convinced the king that he might need a rebel underground. Wait, he did this while the king was still in power? Huh? What would they be expected to rebel against? You'd think the king would have immediately accused him of trying to build up a terrorist group to overthrow him. The next panel then explains Antoine's origins finally by saying that he was a cadet in training, preparing for the day when the kingdom might be attacked by her enemies. That's weird since kingdom in French is a masculine word, so I got nothing on that one. And he implies that the close friend of the king's was his father, explaining why he called Sonic a commoner earlier. Just like I had suspected, he's from nobility and only got his position through nepotism. So if the Rebel Underground started out as basically a secret military to protect the kingdom, then why was it called the Rebel Underground to start with before Robotnik even took over? Why was it proposed under that name? That was needlessly confusing. And if the kings agreed to this, then why did he agree to dismantle his military? If he's smart enough to see how the kingdom could benefit from protection from the military, he shouldn't have done that in the first place to create a situation where he'd need a secret military. It was pretty cute seeing Antoine with his father when he was younger trying to look brave. Before the Rebel Underground could have even been established, though, Antoine's father became a casualty in Robotnik's war, and then Jeffrey showed up claiming to be its leader. So, what's suspicious about that? He formed it just like any of the other millions of other freedom fighters groups, none of whom have taken down Eggman yet, with him being overwhelmed on all sides with freedom fighters all over the world. Because I guess the main group is the only remotely competent one, or Eggman is just that threatening. Jeffrey asks who this supposed general was, and Antoine tackles him in a rage, saying that it was his father, and he's, stolen his family honor? How? It's not like he shamed Antoine's family. And at least he shows that he truly cares for his father, but Jeffrey does point out that he never even knew the guy. After Antoine calls Jeffrey an imposter, Sally breaks up the fight, and Tails says, looking inexplicably worried, that he never knew Antoine wasn't a real soldier. And yet Sonic did, talking casually about it like he knew it all along. If he's Tails' friend, you'd think he wouldn't have kept him in the dark about this arbitrarily. It's said that Antoine was too young to be a soldier, and just wears his uniform as a tribute to his father. I've always assumed Antoine was never a real soldier at his age, although I hope I'm not expected to believe he's able to fit into his father's uniform. Bunny explains that she thinks Antoine used to be a dashing hero, even saving her life before she had been half roboticized. But with being rejected as a suitor by Sally and missing the love from his father, he kind of lost his way, which is supposed to be the explanation for why he was, as Tails put it, such a doofus. You sure he wasn't always this way? And what exactly does he mean by that? That's so general and vague. I can only take it to mean that he just became more of a jerk from craving affection, since I don't see how craving affection would make him a coward. But I'm pretty sure Sonic's vicious bullying of him earlier on might have had something to do with that too. Just a thought. It is really sweet of Tails to actually care about this and feel sorry for Antoine, and want to talk to him after he had stormed off. He hadn't shown any sort of sympathy for him at all since all the way back in that Antoine saves them with the hot air balloon story. Bunny comforts Antoine alone by saying sincerely that she thinks he's very brave, which kind of comes out of nowhere. It does make sense, as being brave doesn't have to be just about being fearless. It can also be about fighting through the fear. I'd say fighting despite the fear is even more impressive and brave than not feeling anything at all. Antoine thanks her, saying glumly that it's nice to know someone cares. Again, this makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense that he would have had this ongoing worry that nobody cares about him. Look at the way he was bullied earlier, and how even now he's not exactly cherished openly in the group. Can you blame him for feeling unloved when he's the least popular in the group? If there's any reason at all for him to be sympathetic, it's this. That he's the scrappy underdog nobody likes. And that's certainly relatable, so it's a shame the self-aware insecure side of him is so rarely shown. And this isn't even the first time he's felt this way. Felt insecure about the idea that he might be seen as useless. As in that hot air balloon story I mentioned earlier, he actually thinks to himself that he's seen as useless. Which he mostly is, but it really does well for this character to make him actually self-aware enough to know, deep down, that people think he's useless. It makes him more sympathetic, rather than having him genuinely be that egocentric. So we are going back to the whole Chuck and Jeffrey thing, right? Aww, Bunny kisses him, and on the cheek, which makes more sense for a first kiss from her. I knew that this was the start of the Bunny and Antoine relationship from the minute she went to talk to him. Meanwhile, Lupe, who I forgot was a girl for a second because of her face, asks Draco suspiciously where he's been all this time. And everyone in his group gangs up on him with her saying that that's the third time he's left the pack this week without permission. I hate the fact that now all of a sudden everyone is standing in a white void, because I guess the artist got really lazy and rushed the story out, or forgot that they were in the woods tonight and instead assumed that they had been drawn into another dimension of nothingness. Sadly, the story just ends with all that suspicion still being there. That leaves us living a disappointing, dissatisfied feeling as the story feels unresolved. And sadly, it doesn't resolve itself in the next issue either. I could only hope that this guy will get what he deserves for accusing Chuck, by being outed as an inexplicable traitor himself. Meanwhile, Knuckles starts out his own story by falling from a hole in the closet, but easily glides to slow down the fall. His falling had been from his failing to take a warning from the ancient walkers much earlier into account. But following their hints exactly is the only reason he's made it this far. So wouldn't that mean that his journey has come to an end unless he climbs back up from the hole he fell in? Since by falling he failed to follow his instructions. Unless he was expected to know that he had to intentionally fall and fail to follow the instructions to progress. Knuckles explores the cave and finds some more mystic ruins, which I misread as mystic ruins twice. He then follows the trail of a stench, and wonders if the people chanting are the wizard and alchemist he was warned about. He presumes, based on where he had found them, that they're Matthew Poe and Damocles the Elder. Well, that's an assumption. After Knuckles falls and gives away his position, one of the wizards summons a robot, and I love how Knuckles actually calls him out on it with a snarky remark, "Don't you think you should leave the bot making to Robotnik?" It's good because it's both calling him out on not being much better than him, a guy that he should hate, and because he's not being very original, just using his powers to uncreatively copy Eggman. Knuckles says that golems are only animated, they get a constant supply of magic for life. Which, it makes sense, but I don't see how he knows that. I guess that's in his Book of Myths too. Knuckles being a book reader, somehow that suits him so well. I mean, he's a serious person. It certainly makes guarding the emerald less tedious. Anyways, from that he comes to the strange conclusion that it's time for a distraction, and shouts, "Who's that?" at him. Huh? Archimedes is suddenly here? Well, I'm not really complaining, I just wish he had told me he had hitched a ride. It kinda feels like a Deus Ex Machina. But though it makes sense, so it isn't really. Archimedes uses his fire breath to help out. and Knuckles defeats the robot with the screws being loose and thus vulnerable. And it's finally explained that Archimedes is up on magical lore and hitched a ride in his backpack to save him. Knuckles asks what he had done to the unreliable looking donkey who looks like he's stoned, saying that he's not moving. Well, it turns out the explanation for that is that he's an actual dummy. And Archimedes says that by the way spells were directed at it, it might be a magical focus of sorts. That sounds pretty fascinating, if arbitrary. Some potions get spilled on the dummy by accident, melting it, and yes, the story ends at a proper time instead of getting dragged out some more as it's revealed that the sword was hidden inside the dummy all along. Or rather, the dummy was transformed into the sword, because it was a disguised magical talisman. Ooh, a sword actually suits him pretty well. It really helps that the sword looks, not overly realistic-like, because I think the biggest reason people said Caliburn looks so out of place in Black Knight is that Sonic was holding onto what looked like a real-life sword, which stuck out like a sore thumb. After it's revealed that the sword only works for royalty because bullshit, Knuckles smiles because his quest is over, and now all he has to do is give the sword to Sally at last. It's nice when he smiles. He does it so rarely that when he actually does, you appreciate it all the more. The first story by Ken Penders and Kent Taylor was pretty disappointing. I got my hopes up because Jeffrey was in it, only for his main character flaw, his paranoia, to finally come back and be played up to the point of absolute absurdity, as not once in the entire time Uncle Chuck was being accused of being a Robian was it ever pointed out that Knothole's still standing. All those accusations of a character I've grown to like, despite his kind of uncreative design. From another character I like at that. It was hard to watch. It makes sense that Robians would be discriminated against because they're robots and people hate robots, but it still wasn't enjoyable to see. It was just doom and gloom the whole way through. Well, at the very least, this was the official start of the Bunny and Antoine relationship, even if not the start of it being a major focus in any way. It is a really charming relationship, making both of the characters more sympathetic and easy to root for, as they finally get to showing someone they love them. It adds a real sense of heart to the Freedom Fighters, having them two as a couple. I just hope this is for real this time, and not a one-time thing again like when Antoine first kissed her for protecting him in Robotropolis. So I liked that, and I liked how this was an issue about backstory, giving us more in-depth info about how Eggman adapted his roboticizing technology from that of Uncle Chuck, and an actual explanation for why he downgraded to a chili dog salesman, and what happened to Sonic's father, as well as giving Antoine backstory too, albeit one that I already figured out on my own. But in the end, it was the Knuckles story, written by the same people at that was the highlight of the issue. Even then, it was definitely the least interesting of the stories where Knuckles was searching for the magic sword. He just fights one robot, Archimedes uses his fire breath, and they spill a potion. That's the annoying thing. By the end, Knuckles only finds a sword by accident. He came all this way here by following the instructions of the ancient walkers exactly, but by the end, it's clumsily failing to do that, which helps him. If he had been more careful and not fallen into the closet that has a skeleton in it for no reason, he wouldn't have found the sword. And he only spilled a potion on the dummy by accident, so in the end, it doesn't really feel like he earned it. Well, actually it does in the sense that I'm so happy the story arc didn't get dragged out for too long like the previous Knuckles story arc. But the point is that in the other Knuckles sword stories, it was all about rewarding Knuckles for being smart enough to figure out what to do based on riddles. But this story just made him bumble into the sword by accident. Not to mention that while he was strong enough to defeat the robot, he never would have won if Archimedes hadn't decided to tag along and help. So he didn't even earn it in a might makes right sense. I do like how it gave a satisfying explanation for why the Donkey Wizard looked so dopey though. He was a dummy imposter the whole time. I'm glad the story arc is finally finished. The Knuckles miniseries sucked, but ironically this turned out to be a much better series of stories for Knuckles, even though he goes through them mostly alone. It turns out he didn't really mind Knuckles talking to himself throughout them. I mean, it makes sense that he would, when you think about it. He spent so much time alone on his island, especially in the games. Why wouldn't he get into that habit of talking to himself just to feel less lonely? So next up is issue 47. Oh, sorry, it's actually the Sonic and Knuckles Battle Royale.